Welcome back. Okay, in this video, we're starting to end the chapter here. We're going to be talking about how we can print our worksheet and how we can get it to fit on one page. So when we go to File and Print, okay, we see the print preview of it. And if you look closely here, you'll notice that it says 1 of 2. It's actually falling on 2 different pages, right? It's being cut. So a lot of worksheets you'll find are actually printed in orientation mode versus portrait mode. So we're going to go back, and what I'm going to do to this sheet I also want done to my formula sheet, because I don't want to have to do these things twice. If I'm trying to get the October sheet to fall on one page, I'm definitely going to have to do that to my formulas page because that's even wider. So what I'm going to do is I'm clicked on October, I'm going to hold down my control key, and I'm going to click on formulas. And now these 2 sheets are grouped together. If you look up in the title bar, you'll see that it says group in brackets, meaning that whatever I do to one sheet will be done to both. So the first step that I'm going to take, I'm going to look on the page layout tab. Okay, and the first step I'm going to make is I'm going to set the orientation to be landscape. Now, because I went to File, Print, Preview, you see this dashed line here, which is showing where the page breaks. Okay, and in formulas you would see the same thing if we went there. So the first thing I'm going to do is flip this to landscape. So orientation, landscape. Immediately I see that now my gray bar looks like this is all going to fit on one page, no problem. Okay. If it didn't, I could go and adjust my margins. So if I went to margins, you have 3 presets here: normal, wide, and narrow. Or you could go down to custom margins and you could set your own custom margins. So maybe I want this to be 1/2 inch on the left and right. Okay. And I can get to print preview from here, which is kind of nice. It's the same as going to File, Print over there, right? So I go to print preview and it brings me in. And I see that my formulas page, that's looking on one page, and now I can see my formulas page, and that's also fitting on one page, right? One of the other things that you need to know how to do is how, let's go back to margins for a second, down to custom margins. You see here this center on page. So horizontally was checked, which is what was giving it the look of being centered on the page. So I'm going to uncheck that for a second so you can see what I mean. When I go to print preview, notice how it's left aligned, right? So if I go back and I set horizontal, notice here it's aligning it center left to right. Vertical would be centering it up and down. So when I look at print preview now, I see that it's vertically up and down and horizontally left to right centered. I think it looks a little silly being that far down, so I'm going to uncheck the vertical center on page. So I'm going to take that off. Okay. So the page setup tab, let me just show you this. We have margins, we have orientation, size, we can set page breaks, we can do titles. But here, if you look at your page dialog box for page setup, it brings you to the same thing that we were looking at before. When we went to margins and more margins, it brought us to this margins tab, and this is where we were. But you can see for the page, you could set your orientation. The other thing you have the ability to do is to set your scaling, and we'll talk about that in a second when we get over to the formulas page, because we're going to see that if it didn't still fit on a page, that basically what you have the ability to do is to adjust the size. So let's say you changed the orientation to landscape, you changed your margins, and for whatever reason it still wasn't fitting on a page. What you could do is you could adjust it to be, say, 90% of normal size. Or you could say, hey, I want you to fit this 1 page wide by however many pages tall. Okay, so that way you want to be careful, because if it's like 5 pages long, you don't want to set it to 1 page tall. You'll never be able to read it. But you can do 1 page wide and by however many pages tall that it is. And that will automatically resize it, its percentage of size, which is kind of nice. Okay, in this case, we are fitting on a page, so it's really not going to do anything. So I'm going to set it back to 100%. But that's definitely something you're going to need to know. And then we have the margins tab, which we already looked at. And then in the next video, we're going to be talking about header and footer. So I'll talk about that in the next video. And on the sheet tab here, you have a couple things that you want to pay attention to. One is, if you wanted it to print grid lines, you could check it here and it would print grid lines. You also could have it show row and column headings. I'll actually do that so you can see what it looks like. It looks kind of silly. But I'm going to go to print preview here, and you'll see how it actually does the grid lines and it does the row numbers and the column headings. You would pretty much never do this in like an office setting, but in an academic setting where you wanted somebody to set something up a certain way, you might go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go back and uncheck that. Okay. And the other thing, when we get into chapter 4, we're going to talk about this page order, and we'll talk about print titles. You don't need to know that for this chapter, but we will be coming back in and discussing these at a later date. Okay. So now I just want to verify that both of these sheets are printing on one page based on what I've done. So I'm going to go to File and Print, and I see that that one fits on a page, and that one also fits on a page. So we're looking pretty good. Just keeping in mind that if it wasn't, that you could either go to that page setup and you could set your scaling here, or if you notice, it's the same thing that's listed here where you could set your width and your height, right? So you could say, okay, I want it to fit on one page wide by one page tall, okay? Or if you set it to automatic, it would be however many pages it is. And that's another way that you can scale it to fit to a page. Okay, and over here is where you could set your grid lines and your headings to print. If you unchecked it for view, watch how crazy that would look. You'd have no grid lines, right? If you unchecked your headings to view, you'd have no columns and row numbers, which would be insane. So you definitely don't want to be doing that. I just always like to show you, in case you do it by accident, what you've done to undo that. Okay, that pretty much sums up what you need to know for this chapter regarding printing. We'll come back in the next video and talk about headers and footers.